What class makes the best ranged weapon user in D&D 5e? Fighter? No. Ranger? I mean, come on, Gloomstalkers, pretty amazing. Again, I'm gonna say no. Would you be surprised if I said I thought it was a spellcaster? If you want to find out why, keep watching. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4 each week I take a deep dive into character builds for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a certain character despite my little teaser intro there, but to explore one potential way to build a character in the hopes of creating something that's both fun but also really powerful to play. So if you enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game itself, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is absolutely where you belong, and I'm so glad that you're here. So thank you for watching. My name is Colby. So yeah, ever since I started this channel, I've been on a quest to find the highest damage dealing ranged weapon user in D&D. I've taken a lot of stabs at it, and we've come up with some great ones, but as great as, say, the pure fighter ranged character is, which you could watch there, or even like a half-caster ranged character, like a ranger can be with ranged weapons, you would think, right? Maybe like that one there. I think when you take a good look at what something like a Gishy caster character can do, you kind of come up with like exhibit number 327 on why full casters tend to trump pure martial characters, and even often half-casters in D&D 5e, at least if we're talking about damage. But actually, if you're talking about other stuff too, right? But especially if you can multi-class those casters into a martial character to pick up some of the martial class's best features. Because, sure, martial characters often get things that can enhance their attacks, fighting styles, weapon proficiencies, class and subclass features, but at the end of the day, despite those things, it's just really hard for pure martial characters to keep up with the power of spells. Spells that can just about guarantee you advantage on your attacks, or that augment your damage, often scaling when you upcast them, thus encouraging you to take more levels in caster rather than a martial class. These things very often let a martial-focused caster, or Gish, right, or spellsword, outpace the damage that a full caster can do. And that's saying nothing of all the other amazing control, utility, and support you can get from spells outside of just damage. Take all of that and add it to a caster subclass that gets some additional weapon using benefits like the Swords Bard or the Blade Singer, or yes, the Hexblade Warlock, and the gap between martials and casters gets even wider. On that note, the one ranged build that I've never done that people have been asking me to do a video on since day one of this YouTube channel is the Hexbow. And I mean, I have done plenty of Hexblade Warlocks, even a ranged one, the Hexblade Singer, right? And even a ranged Genie Lock mixed with an Arcane Archer that you can check out there. But I've never really taken a stab at the true Hexbow itself. Now, this is not a concept that I invented, right? I'm not quite sure who did, though I know that Chris, Treant Monk, did a video on the idea years ago, but today I figured, okay, it's been long enough, how would I try to optimize this concept? And the video today is the result of that attempt. And let me just add this quickly. It does seem to me, at least, like Wizards of the Coast is trying to narrow that divide, or maybe perceived divide, I suppose, for some of you, between martials and casters with the new rules that are coming out later in 2024. In the playtest, at least, it seems to me that there's still a bit of a problem in that you could, as a mostly caster, just dip into a martial class to pick up a lot of the benefits that martials are getting. But it does seem like martials are scaling a bit better in the upcoming material. I hope that ends up being the case, and that Wizards does even more to help them scale further, making it less tempting to multi-class into a caster, as much as I love doing so. But we'll see. Anyways, today I am excited to present D&D Build number 166, the Hexbow. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put out for this build. He does this every week. I love what he comes up with. If you would be interested in following him to check out the other art that he does, or maybe even reaching out to see if you can commission him to create some art for your character or even your entire party, I will put links in the video description, as always, on how to do so. Ooh. Son of a... D&D canceled again. Third time in a row. Dang it. If I don't play some D&D soon, I'm gonna explode. Have you ever considered playing D&D by yourself? What are you, like my RPG fairy godmother or something? More like your obvious mimic. But you don't look like... Forget it. Okay. Cool shirt, by the way. Thank you. So, wait. Solo D&D? That sounds complicated. Or, like, maybe impossible. You'd think so. But what if I told you that there was a company who specialized in creating solo D&D adventures, meant to be played by yourself, whether because your regular group canceled, or because you're just feeling a little antisocial, or you can't find a group, or maybe you just need to scratch that itch between sessions? You have my attention. What if I told you that this company has not only already created 2 very successful solo D&D adventures to date, but that they had a third called Oki Island that is currently in Kickstarter and has destroyed its funding goal? I'd say, tell me more. Okay, I will. This adventure is full of swashbuckling action, hidden treasure, and open seas. It's set in a world that is as whimsical as it is deadly, basically letting you fulfill all of your D&D pirate fantasies. But you play at your own pace, you level up, you gain loot, and if nothing else, it would let you test out all of the... What are we up to? 166 different character builds to date that you haven't had a chance to play yet? Right. Take my money. Perfect. Just go to the link in the video description or in the pinned comment and, use that so that they know your favorite mimic sent you. And back the project. Don't delay, because you've only got a few days left and you don't want to miss out on the opportunity to get all of the great goodies from backing a Kickstarter project while it's still in Kickstarter, right? I know if you put it off, you're gonna forget. Don't do it. All right. Big thanks to Obvious Mimic, and let's get back to the build. Okay, at level 1 for our starting class, we're building a Hexblade Warlock ranged weapon user. Naturally then, the first thing that we're going to do is start fighter. Sorry folks, it's just the optimal choice here for 2 main reasons, right? Constitution saving throw proficiency so that we can have better concentration checks, and a very important fighting style. Feel free to dive right into Warlock instead at level 1 if you'd rather, but yeah, we are going to start fighter. For our race, though, I'm going to present 2 different options. Option number 1, half-elf. Half-elf is great because you get more ability score increase points than other races, except the mountain dwarf, I guess, and access to the famed elven accuracy feat. The problem is, on this build, you wouldn't actually take elven accuracy until what would be character level 13, as I've mapped it out anyways. From that point on, yeah, it would do more damage than the second option that I'll mention in a second, but up until then, unless you're playing at a table that gives everyone a free feat at level 1, in which case, yeah, go half-elf all the way for sure. Option 2 is going to be stronger, numerically anyways, and since most of us don't even play the game up to or beyond level 13, it just made more sense for me, I think, to assume that we're going to go with the second option, which would be to start, no, not custom lineage. That's boring and so overused. We're gonna go variant human, which is like just as overused. Because yes, variant humans get to start with a free feat, and as a ranged weapon user, there are, of course, 2 very important feats for us to take, and if we can start with one of them, and then get the other one just a few levels in, we will be in such a better place for a long, long time than if we hadn't started with a free feat. Those 2 feats, of course, are Sharpshooter and Crossbow Expert, and the only real question is, which one should we start with? I'm gonna say Sharpshooter, but you could really go either way. Which one is better is going to depend on the enemy's armor class more than anything, but since that tends to be fairly low for the first few levels, let's go ahead and start Sharpshooter here. It's amazing. It tells us that we don't have disadvantage on the longer range of our ranged weapons, right? Like we otherwise would. That we ignore 1/2 and 3/4 cover when making ranged attacks, which usually would increase an enemy's AC by 2 or 5 respectively. And then, yes, when we make an attack with a ranged weapon, we can, if we choose, take a -5 penalty to hit in order to do 10 more flat damage, and that's just a ton more damage. I will, as always, indicate in the spreadsheets that I link to in the video description for each build, which, check that out if you didn't know that I do that. But anyways, I will indicate at what enemy AC that you'll want to turn this feature off, like I also always do. The cell that's yellow is the point at which, you no longer use Sharpshooter or Great Weapon Master, for that matter, on builds that use Great Weapon Master. But at this level, you're probably going to want to have it on most of the time, if not all of the time, unless your DM is super mean and pitting you against high AC enemies. As for our starting ability scores, I'm going to assume that we're going the point buy method as always and say let's go with a 15 charisma and then take one of our +1s from Variant Human there, a 15 constitution, the other +1 there, and then a 14 dexterity. This is going to let us get the best possible start for our health and concentration checks, our armor class, and soon for both our weapon damage and spell DC. For now, we'll have to get by with a 14 dexterity for our weapon attacks, but that will switch to charisma soon enough. As for equipment that we should start with here, I'm just going to say let's make sure to grab a hand crossbow and then some scale mail armor. You might have to go the gold buy method in order to do that. But then as a fighter 1, we get second wind, which lets us heal ourselves a little bit once per short rest as a bonus action, and then the aforementioned fighting style, which of course will be the archery fighting style for us. Best fighting style in game. It gives us a +2 to hit with ranged weapons, which is so much stronger than adding a little bit of damage per hit, especially when we consider things like Sharpshooter, right? That are going to be subtracting 5 to our hit chance. But at level 2, with those important features from starting fighter secured, it's time to get into Warlock so that we can be firing on all cylinders by our first damage report coming up at level 6. So we would be a Warlock 1 here, and as a Warlock 1, we get our otherworldly patron. But speaking of patrons, you should seriously consider becoming a patron of this channel. How's that for suave? For reals though, if you enjoy what I do here, I would really appreciate it if you guys would consider joining the channel as a member. There's a little button down there, it says join. If you click it, it'll tell you about all the little perks you can get by being a channel member. Everything from access to the library of write-ups that I create for these builds every week to help you recreate them yourself a little more easily, to access to our D4 community Discord server, to access to the monthly live Q&A sessions that we do. A huge shout out and thank you to my patrons, channel members. You guys are awesome. I could not do this without you. And everybody else, thank you just for being here and watching and liking and subscribing and clicking the notifications bell. You don't have to be a member if you don't want to. The fact that you're watching me say these things right now is indicative of your support, and I am grateful for it. Anyways, yes, as for the subclass that we take here, our otherworldly patron, we are going to take Hexblade, of course, which will give us a couple of wonderful features. Hex Warrior gives us proficiency with medium armor, shields, and martial weapons, none of which we actually need, but it also lets us touch one weapon that we're proficient in and make it essentially our hex weapon. The book doesn't call it that, but D&D Beyond does, meaning that we can use our charisma for our plus to hit and damage with it instead of our strength or dexterity. Now, that weapon cannot have the two-handed property, which is why we didn't want to go with like a long bow or a heavy crossbow at level 1, though later we will be able to use a two-handed weapon. Even then we're not going to want to because we're going to be getting crossbow expert soon, which really shines with the hand crossbow, right? So we're going to be content just sticking hand crossbow. And yeah, this is one of the best things about Hexblades, as most of you know, being able to be so sad, a single ability score dependent, so that we can focus on bumping our charisma and just our charisma and thus be a great party face and have fantastic spell potency and make our weapon attacks as great as they can be, all with one single ability score. Now we also, as a Hexblade, get Hexblade's Curse, which tells us that once per short rest, as a bonus action, we can curse a target, and thereafter we get a critical hit on that target when we roll a 19 or a 20, doubling our critical hit chance. Nice. Also, whenever we do damage to that target, we get to add our proficiency bonus in damage. And when they die, we heal hit points equal to our Warlock level plus our Charisma modifier. Such a great feature. It's not really sustainable though, so I'm not going to count it towards our damage when we crunch numbers, as we are building this character for sustained damage. I don't think I've actually mentioned that yet, have I? Anyways, yeah, sustained damage here. But later, much later, actually, it will be sustainable damage, as we'll eventually see. Now, as a Warlock 1, we get spells, and I'd probably just go with the usual suspects here. Nothing I'm necessarily going to be trying to account for when we do crunch numbers here in a few minutes, but Hex is not a bad use of our concentration for now, especially since we don't have a good use for our bonus action, letting us do an extra d6 of damage when we hit. Armor of Agathis is a nice defensive option that gives temporary hit points and returns damage to a melee attacker if they hit us. Hexblades, amazingly, get access to the shield spell that Warlocks typically don't get access to, one of the best defensive spells in the game, raising our armor class by 5 if we use our reaction to cast it when we get hit, potentially causing the hit to miss, and even lasting until the beginning of our next turn. I would focus on those spells and then whatever else you think you might want. At level 3, we would be a Warlock too, and that means we get the beautiful, lovely Eldritch Invocations. These let us buff ourselves and or our spells or abilities in a variety of ways, and we can take 2 at this level, and the 2 that I would take for now anyways would be Eldritch Mind, as it gives us advantage on our concentration checks, and while that is awesome, I would be swapping it out for something else next level, which we can do with our Eldritch Invocations whenever we gain a level in Warlock, right? But then for the second one, I'd take, that old standby Devil Sight, letting us see in magical and non-magical darkness at a distance of up to 120 feet. Yeah, you probably know where we're going here, but it's going to be okay. So level 4, we'd be a Warlock 3. That means we get our Pact Boon, right? And of the options available to us, of course, we're going to want Pact of the Blade. Not so much because it gives us a ton of benefits in and of itself. I mean, it lets us magically create or summon a previously bonded weapon into our hand with an action, which is kind of cool. But we mostly want this Pact because it's a prerequisite for a lot of fantastic invocations that we're going to want to pick up throughout our career. Starting with improved Pact Weapon, which we should swap in for Eldritch Mind here, I think. Improved Pact Weapon makes our Pact Weapon, which will be the same as our Hex Weapon, right, a spellcasting focus, and also makes it a +1 weapon, giving us a better hit chance and more damage. Very nice. Also, don't forget that we're told by our Hex Warrior feature that if we get the Pact of the Blade later, then any weapon that we conjure with Pact of the Blade can use our Charisma for attacking, not just our Hex Weapon. And it doesn't matter what the weapon's type is, meaning that, yeah, we could use a two-handed weapon for our Hex and or Pact Weapon right now if we wanted. We don't want to do that, or at least not once we get a hand crossbow. I suppose for now, sure, we could use like a heavy crossbow just until next level to get a little bit more damage. Or alternatively, yeah, we could like dual wield right now using our Charisma for both our Hex Weapon and our Pact Weapon. They don't have to be the same weapon, something we tried to make use of in the fairly recent Hexblade 2.0 video. We also get second level Warlock spells here, and while there are a lot of great ones to choose from, I'm going to say we absolutely need to make sure that we get Misty Step first up, because it's a bonus action teleport that you just always want if you can get it. And then, yeah, the Darkness spell.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
At this point, it may feel a little cliche, but let's discuss. So, yeah, with Darkness, we use our action and our concentration to cast a 15-foot radius sphere of magical darkness centered on a point of our choosing. We'll be choosing ourselves for that point, or like maybe something that we're carrying, maybe our weapon, right? Now, creatures with dark vision can't see through this darkness, but with Devil Sight, yeah, we can. The great benefit to this, of course, is that it means that most creatures, unless they have some way of seeing in magical darkness themselves, and most don't, will have disadvantage on attacks against you, and your attacks against them will have advantage, since they can't see you. Now, yes, the big drawback to going the Devil Sight darkness route is that it can potentially really mess up your teammates, as they probably can't see in magical darkness any better than your enemies can, and that can be really annoying. But let me say two things. Number one, this is way less annoying if you are a ranged character, since you're not going to be running up to your enemy and attacking them, keeping your allies from seeing them, right? Most of the time, especially with Sharpshooter, you should be able to stay pretty far away from both your enemies and your allies and just make your attacks with advantage without disturbing your friends too much. And the great thing about Darkness is that it moves with whatever you cast the spell on. So if you cast it on yourself or something you're wearing, it's going to move with you, unlike in Baldur's Gate 3, annoyingly. Take a drink. Now, it can still be problematic if you're fighting in a small room or something, right? But most of the time, you should be okay. But then, the second thing that makes me feel okay about using this strategy is we're only going to be doing this for like 4 levels. So if you take both of those things together, yeah, I'm a lot less worried about using the Darkness Devil Sight tactic for a few levels here than I would if we weren't planning on changing our tactics later and if we were a melee character. Think we can stomach it for a few levels? All right, let's do it. At level 5, we would be a Warlock 4. That means we get an ability score increase or feat, and yes, we want that other super potent feat that makes the 1-2 punch of the hand crossbow user so good, Crossbow Expert. This tells us that we ignore the loading property of crossbows now, which is nice, since otherwise we'd only be able to make one attack with them per turn, no matter how many attacks we might potentially have, right? Also, that being within 5 feet of an enemy doesn't impose disadvantage on our ranged attacks. Really nice, so that we don't have to worry so much about whether or not an enemy manages to get up into melee range. And then, best of all, when we attack with a one-handed weapon with our attack action, we can use a bonus action to attack with a hand crossbow that we are holding, and since a hand crossbow is a one-handed weapon, that means that it qualifies for the prerequisite of being able to make a bonus action attack with the one-handed crossbow. So we can now just make 2 attacks on our turn with that same hand crossbow. 3 attacks once we get extra attack, right? Or something like it. Now, I feel compelled to mention that yes, both Sharpshooter and Crossbow Expert are slated to get nerfs with the new rules coming out in 2024. Arguably, Crossbow Expert is kind of getting some buffs and some nerfs, but overall I think losing the bonus action attack outweighs the small buffs that it's getting. So yeah, there's a chance that you might want to go a different route if you're watching this video post September 2024, but we'll see. I'll for sure be making a lot of character builds with the new rule set once they come out, so, you know, be sure to tune in. All right, at level 6, we would be a Warlock 5, and that means we get 3rd level Warlock spells, and while, of course, Counterspell, Fly, Hypnotic Pattern, Fear, and more are really strong and absolutely worth considering, I'll maybe just mention Spirit Shroud here as a potential damage option, though I don't think we should be using it much. It requires our concentration, so we couldn't use Darkness, right? But then causes our attacks made from within 10 feet of the enemy to do an extra d8 of damage, and it can scale when upcast up to 2d8 with a 5th level spell, but generally, especially with that -5 to hit plus 10 to damage from Sharpshooter, we'll be a lot better off using our concentration on Darkness to get advantage on all but the very lowest enemy ACs when compared to Spirit Shroud. Of course, you know, maybe you've got an ally casting Fairy Fire or something, I don't know. If so, this is worth considering, but the 10-foot range for it to work is kind of annoying on a ranged build, right? Anyways, having those other really powerful spells to pull out when we need them will just be really fantastic. But I'm just going to assume when I crunch numbers that we're still concentrating on Darkness. But as great as those 3rd level spells are, the thing that I'm most excited about at Warlock 5 is the fact that we get a 3rd invocation, and that we can now take the Thirsting Blade invocation, which tells us that we can attack twice with our packed weapon now when we take the attack action, meaning that we will get 3 Sharpshooter infused attacks every single round, and that's just going to add up to some really big damage. Just in time for our level 6 damage report. So, tactics-wise, things are fairly straightforward for us. On round 1, we'd cast Darkness on ourselves, and thereafter we'd start turning our enemies into pincushions, making 3 hand crossbow attacks against them every round, adding 3 damage from our Charisma, 1 from our improved packed weapon invocation, and 10 from Sharpshooter to every single attack, with a fairly decent hit chance here, all things considered. +3 from our proficiency, +3 from our Charisma modifier, +1 from improved packed weapon, and +2 from archery fighting style means that even after our -5 to hit penalty from Sharpshooter, we're still at a +4 to hit with advantage. That is not bad at all. And so, against enemies with a 10 armor class here, we would on average do 53 damage per round, and against enemies with a 15 AC, it would be 47 DPR. And compared to other sustained damage dealers that I've built to date at this level, that puts us right near the top of tier 1, including both my first ever video on this channel, the Hexblade Warlock that was a melee character, right? The Pamlock. I don't have any cards left, but here's the thumbnail. Build number 1. And it also outdamages every other sustained damage dealing weapon user that I've ever made. At this level anyways. And maybe at other levels too. So yeah, sorry crossbow fighters and rangers of the world. The Hexbow just ranks. I'm kind of upset too, don't get mad at me. Oh, and yeah, we can also mass fear or hypnotic pattern or counterspell when we need to, or cast the shield spell, and enemies have disadvantage on attacks against us. And guess what? It only gets better from here. But not because of the Hexblade feature that we get at level 7, Warlock 6, which is a Cursed Spectre. This is my least favorite Hexblade feature. It's kind of cool and flavorful, but mechanically it just feels a little clunky to me. It's hard to account for it in the spreadsheets anyways. It tells us that once per day, when we kill a humanoid specifically, we can raise a specter from its corpse that will obey and fight for us, rolling its own initiative and just obeying our verbal commands. No action or bonus action required by us. It will last until it dies or we take a long rest. So potentially it can add to our sustained DPR, but I feel a little uncomfortable making that assumption. If it worked on any creature, not just humanoids, and if we could do this proficiency bonus times per day or something, it'd be a little easier to assume that, but I don't know if you're going to be fighting humanoids, or if we are going to get the killing blow on a humanoid for that matter, or if it will still be alive every single fight once you have raised it, right? Most likely they won't be. When we have them, it'll be a nice little damage bump, maybe add a little tankiness to our party, potentially absorbing some attacks that otherwise would go to ourselves or a friend. It does get a little extra temporary hit points equal to half our Warlock level and a bonus to hit equal to our Charisma modifier, and it hits for 3d6 damage. But it has sunlight sensitivity, so they'd have disadvantage if they were in direct sunlight. That's kind of annoying. And only a 12 AC with basically 25 hit points right now. So it's probably only going to be around for a fight or maybe two if we do manage to get it going. It does have a lot of decent damage resistances, even some damage and condition immunities, and hey, if your enemies are focusing on it instead of you and your other party members, that's a win. So yeah, nice when we can use it, but I'm not sure how often that'll be for you. We also do get a 4th invocation at this level, and while there are lots of great ones to choose from, and I would really love to get Eldritch Mind back, which I dropped a while ago, since we have Constitution saving throw proficiency by starting Fighter 1, and since most enemies will have disadvantage on attacks against us to begin with, I'm probably instead going to take Eldritch Smite here, because it's just so cool. It's similar to Divine Smite. It can add damage to our weapon attacks, right? 2d8 for a first level spell plus another d8 for every spell level above that we upcast it. But unlike Divine Smite, it doesn't cap at 5d8, meaning it can do up to 6d8 with a 5th level spell slot. And, best of all, it doesn't have to be a melee weapon attack. Hooray! Channeling my best Bluey.
Oh my goodness!
Now, we can only do it once per turn, and we have to use a Warlock spell slot for it, even if we had spell slots from some other class, right? And we only have 2 Warlock spell slots per short rest, and I'm going to be using one of them to cast Darkness, right? So yeah, meaning at best we'd have 1 spell slot left for a fight. Do you really want to blow your last spell slot to do what would be an extra 4d8 of damage at this level? Heck yeah, we do if we crit. Because yeah, then you could double the damage to 8d8, and that's just too juicy to pass up, I think. So sure, going forward, I'm gonna add this to the numbers. If we crit, I'll assume that we smite, and then we're gonna double the smite damage, right? I know I won't always have the spell slot available, and I also know that sometimes I'm gonna wanna smite even if I don't crit, since it just might be enough to finish off an enemy, yeah? But it seems maybe the best way to account for smites on a sustained damage build is like this. Hopefully it doesn't upset you too much. Oh, also, we're told that Eldritch Smite can knock an enemy prone if they're huge or smaller, which is awesome, unless we're needing to attack them from range, because if they're prone, we're gonna have disadvantage, right? Just remember, simply because we can knock them prone doesn't mean we have to.
But just because you can beat him up doesn't give you the right to.
If it were me, I'd probably do it if it were like our last attack on our turn, so that our melee allies could then have advantage on their attacks, and so that the enemy has to use half their movement speed on their turn to stand up. But otherwise, I probably wouldn't bother knocking them prone. At level 8, we would be a Warlock 7, and that means we get 4th level Warlock spells, and while Banishment is really fantastic for single target control, Dimension Door is a wonderful utility spell to teleport both you and a friend a huge distance. The one I'm going to say we absolutely have to get here is Shadow of Moil, as that is going to end our darkness problem, since Shadow of Moil heavily obscures you, creating the same benefits of you not being seen, right? But it's just you and only you, no more 30-foot bubble. What's more, this spell has the added benefits of giving you radiant damage resistance and returning 2d8 necrotic damage automatically whenever an enemy within 10 feet of you hits you with an attack. And you know, I kind of want to say this about Warlocks. People sometimes complain about how they only have 2 spell slots for most of their career. But to me, there's something kind of nice about just always having your spells be of the highest level possible at all times. It sort of takes away the anxiety I sometimes get about whether or not I should upcast a thing, you know? Do I really want to spend a 5th level spell slot on Spirit Shroud or Spirit Guardians here? Would a 3rd level spell slot or a 4th level spell slot be sufficient? If Warlocks work like other casters, I'd probably be tempted to keep using Darkness at this point in the build, despite the problematic nature of the thing. Instead, it's just an automatic jump to Shadow of Moil, no anxiety needed, because all of my spell slots are 4th level spell slots, right? And while, sure, you only have 2 spell slots, the fact that they reset on a short rest makes it so that you can almost always know that you'll have at least one for a combat encounter. And it makes for a really unique playstyle and build strategy that I enjoy. I'm really glad Wizards of the Coast decided to keep that intact for the new version of the rules coming out later this year. In playtesting, originally they were trying to make them more like other casters in the game, right? And they reverted back, and I'm glad they did. To be fair, the flip side can be frustrating in that you want to cast a 2nd level spell, you have 4th level spell slots, doesn't give you any additional benefit when you upcast it, but you really need to Misty Step, right? Or whatever. Of course, in our case, that would mean we get to Dimension Door now instead, which is better, but you get what I'm saying. Another nice benefit of being able to use Shadow of Moil now instead of Darkness is that we don't need the Devil's Sight invocation anymore. You might want to keep it because Dark Vision's great, and if we went Variant Human, we don't have it, let alone being able to see in Magical Darkness. I think personally, I'd switch that invocation out at this level for Eldritch Mind though, so that I could both add my proficiency bonus to my concentration checks and have advantage on those concentration checks. With enemies having disadvantage to hit me, I am very, very rarely dropping concentration on this character, especially if I can get this invocation, and that just feels awesome. At level 9, we would be a Warlock 8, and that means another ability score increase or feat, and if we're interested in damage above all else, then of course we're going to bump our charisma here, taking it to 18, and that has the added benefit of improving our social interactions and spells to boot. And yeah, for those who decided to play for the late game and start as a half-elf, you're just now getting to Crossbow Expert at character level 9. That feels pretty crappy by comparison. And you still only have a +3 modifier to your charisma. Yucky. We do get a 5th invocation here as well, and I'm just going to say PYF, pick your favorite. There are tons of great options. Ascendant Step for like at-will levitation might be my first pick, I think, but Tomb of Levistus is a fun break glass in case of emergency survival tool. Relentless Hex lets you teleport at will to your Hexblade cursed target. That could be clutch. I seem to remember Matt Mercer using that in a game once to like save himself from falling off a cliff to his death. Anyways, I'd love to hear which invocation you would take at this level. Okay, at level 9, it is time for our next damage report. Since last check, our damage increases have come in the form of a better charisma score and an Eldritch Smite at the 4th level on a crit. Not huge gains, but we have the much better Shadow of Moil now for advantage purposes, and we've picked up some great utility and control potential as well, and even a little Cursed Spectre to help us out once in a while. But here, against enemies with 10 armor class, we would on average do 68 DPR, and against a 16 AC, it would be 58 damage per round. And compared to other DPR builds that I've done to date, at this level, we've plateaued a little bit by comparison, putting us more like middle of tier 2 here. But yeah, we've got some really nice bumps coming our way soon, and hey, mid-tier 2 is still a really strong place to be. Alright, at level 10, we would be a Warlock 9, and that means 5th level spells. And yeah, Hold Monster is incredible for single target control. Consider using your concentration on this if you feel fairly confident that the enemy will fail their save against it, as it's going to mean a ton of auto crits for your entire party, right? Not to mention keep the enemy from doing anything. Synaptic Static I love for the fireball-like damage and area of effect that targets an intelligent saving throw and gives a nasty debuff. A Banishing Smite could be a fun Nova option that also controls and is unique for Hexblades among Warlocks. If it didn't require concentration, I'd love it a lot more, but it's still a strong option. It's still worth considering. Regardless, nothing here that I'll plan on using in combat necessarily, so PYF. At level 11, we'd be a Warlock 10, and as a Hexblade Warlock, we get Armor of Hexes here. This is a cool defensive feature for Hexblades, telling us that if our Hexblade cursed target hits us with an attack, you can use your reaction to roll a d6, and if you roll a 4 or higher, the attack just misses instead. So 50% chance that at least once around you can have your cursed target miss you. This could come in handy if you were low on health or if they crit you, especially. The unreliability of it is a little frustrating to me. I wish that like maybe you'd get your reaction back if it failed or something, or maybe it would cut the damage in half if it failed. But there will be times that it'll be a huge lifesaver, no question. At level 12, we would be a Warlock 11. And unfortunately, this is where our spell slots stop progressing, right? They stay at level 5 forever, though we do have 3 of them now, and 3 5th level spell slots at level 11 that reset on a short rest is pretty dang powerful. Anyways, we do get 6th level spells here, but they come in the form of Mystic Arcanum, right? And as such, don't take a spell slot to cast, and we can't further upcast other spells to 6th level, right? And then we can only use that Mystic Arcanum once per day. Of all the options available to us here, I think Mass Suggestion is the clear pick, as it can potentially just end a combat encounter all by itself, depending on what you suggest and how many enemies fail their save against it anyways. It doesn't even require concentration, meaning we could keep using Shadow of Moyle if we wanted in the same encounter. It's so good. Feel free to take something else if you really want, but I think you'd be crazy for doing so, but that's okay. I like crazy. At level 13, we would be a Warlock 12, and that means yet another ability score increase or feat, and yeah, let's bump Charisma one more time to finally cap it at 20 here. Now, if you went half elf, you finally get to enjoy the main reason you went that route in the first place. You know, you get Elven Accuracy here, and even though that would only put our Charisma at an 18, assuming we started with a 17 Charisma, right? That triple advantage that we get from the feat is going to mean that the build finally outpaces a variant human version damage-wise, at least at kind of middling and higher enemy armor class. We do get a 6th invocation here at this level as well, and this is the one I have been eyeballing ever since level 1. It is one of the most potent invocations available to Gishi Warlocks, but wasn't available until this level, and it's just so good. It's kind of like Tavern Brawler in BG3 Take a Drink, in that it doubles now our Charisma modifier for damage when we hit with our packed weapon. Meaning that, yeah, when we hit an enemy with Sharpshooter turned on, we're going to do 20 damage before we even roll any dice. 21 with improved packed weapon, I guess, or if we have an even stronger hand crossbow by now, which we very well could. That's just so awesome. I am absolutely in love with consistent, guaranteed damage, and this is about as good as it gets in D&D for that, alongside with like Blade Singer's Song of Victory, but this is even better, I think, and available sooner for that matter. And all of that comes just in time for our next damage report. Since last check, in addition to the nice defensive, control, and utility options that we've picked up, we've capped our Charisma and gotten that oh-so-sweet Life Drinker invocation, as well as increased our potential smites on a crit to 12d8 damage. And altogether, this is going to do really nice things for our numbers. So against enemies with a 10 armor class here, we would do 90 damage per round on average. And against a 17, it would be 79 DPR. And compared to other DPR builds that I've done to date at this level, that puts us kind of top of tier 2, bottom of tier 1. So we've made up some ground, almost broke that century mark, and are filled with fantastic defense, utility, and control capabilities. It is an awesome place to be. At level 14, we would be a Warlock 13. Wait, we're still taking Warlock levels? Where is Colby and what have you done with him? I know, I'm just as surprised as you are, but there are so many good things for us on the horizon. So yeah, I think we gotta stick with Warlock a little bit longer. First up, that means that we get our 7th level Mystic Arcanum here, and as great as some of the spell options are, I think we've got to take Force Cage here. I mean, it's one of the best control spells in the game. It just traps creatures inside of an invisible cage that's really hard to get out of, and it doesn't even require concentration. That's a no-brainer to me, and such a fantastic weapon to add to our arsenal. But then at level 15, we would be a Warlock 14, and we get the Hexblade like capstone feature, and again, it's just so good. Master of Hexes lets us continue to apply our Hexblade's curse to our next target when our cursed target dies. And that means that Hexblade's curse can finally be considered sustainable. And yeah, an extra 5 damage now, 6 pretty soon on every single attack is pretty beefy. Meaning that we're looking at a flat, 27 damage on every single hit before dice rolls, and critting on a 19 or a 20, which when we smite for 12d8 on a crit is a pretty nice little bump. Now, one note, when you apply the curse in this way, you don't get the healing from the previously killed target, and that's fine, honestly. But at level 16, yes, now that we've hit that Hexblade capstone, I think I probably would go back to Fighter here. It's definitely not mandatory. 8th and 9th level Warlock spells would be nice, and more invocations would be great too. But if we're looking for sustainable damage, not to mention burst damage options, it's hard to pass on a couple more Fighter levels instead, in my book. At Fighter 2 then, yeah, we get Action Surge. That lets us take 2 actions on a turn, once per short rest. And as great as this can be for burst damage, I think I would more often be using it to cast Shadow of Moil, Action Surge, and then go into my damage rotation right on round 1 instead of having to wait a turn to like set things up before we start hitting, right? It just feels so much better than waiting until round 2 to start firing. In fact, for that reason, I probably would have taken Fighter 2 a lot sooner if I were playing this character in game. Maybe after I got to like Warlock 5, I'm thinking, but the spreadsheets just looked a lot better if I delayed it until now, so here we are. But then finally, for us, at level 13, we would be a Fighter 3, and that means we get our Martial Archetype, our Fighter subclass, and I think there are several options that would work great here. Battle Master is always fantastic, both for damage, utility. Rune Knight is a favorite, of course, for a little damage bump and some powerful runes, but I think for this character, my preference would actually be Psi Warrior. First of all, because they feel a little magic-y themselves, so it feels like a nice thematic fit, but also because the psionic power feature that they get here, especially now that our proficiency bonus is so high, feels a lot more usable and sustainable than other options. Psionic power tells us that we now have a pool of psionic energy dice similar to superiority dice for battle masters. The dice are d6s and we have 2 times our proficiency bonus of them, so 12 now. They don't reset until a long rest, but depending on your table, you should be able to use them a lot of the time still, at least once per turn for 1 combat encounter, which is kind of my bare minimum to consider a thing sustainable, right? And especially since you can, once per short rest, regain 1 energy die as a bonus action. Now, we use these to do one of 3 things. Protective Field lets us use our reaction to absorb some damage done to us or an ally. It's not much though with our low intelligence modifier, probably not really worth using unless it's the difference between life or death. Telekinetic Movement lets us move an object or a willing creature with our mind, some handy utility there. And then, yeah, Psionic Strike, which lets us add an energy die in damage once per turn to a target within 30 feet of us that we hit with a weapon attack. Plus our intelligence modifier, but we kind of dumped intelligence, so doesn't really do much for us. Hopefully you got it up to at least a 10 at character creation. We should have the points for that. Or better yet, maybe you've been able to find a headband of intellect here. Though, do we really want to use one of our attunement slots for a headband of intellect at this level? Probably not. Anyways, I'm just going to assume that we've got a flat d6 to our damage once per turn. Not a lot, but it's a little bump as well as some additional utility, and unlike the Giant's Might feature from Rune Knights, we don't have to spend a bonus action first to be able to get that extra bit of damage, right? Rune Knight's got to activate Giant's Might, that takes a bonus action, and this you can just add it on a hit. So I think it's a little better. Okay, at level 17, it is time for our final damage report. Since last check, we have gained some nice burst and control options, and a nice sustained damage bump thanks to Master of Hexes, and a small bump from Psionic Strike. But here, against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 112 damage per round, and against an 18 AC, it would be 98 DPR, getting us past that century mark, almost at an 18 armor class even, which is just fantastic, landing us kind of in the middle of tier 1 compared to other sustained damage builds that I've done to date at this level. So let's bring it on home with some final thoughts.
Any last words?
The tier score for this build, if you take the damage that they do at each of the armor classes that we account for at each of the 4 damage reports that we report on, just average them all into one big number, we end up with a 64.37 actually, right next to that first build melee focused Pamlock, right? The Hexblade. Not too surprisingly, they've got a lot of similar features, but with the fantastic added benefit of being ranged and having a little more burst damage capability, or maybe ability to get firing on all cylinders a little quicker, thanks to the fighter dip. In the end, is the build a success? No question. Yeah, absolutely. It really does outperform every other ranged weapon user I've ever built at every damage report. And it's beating or is neck and neck with every other Hexblade character I've ever done for sustained damage. And it just brings so much fantastic utility, control, and defensive options with them along to the table in addition to that damage. So yeah, again, sorry fighters and rangers, but the next time I decide to play a ranged weapon user in a D&D game, I think I probably gotta go Hexbow. And that doesn't make me too sad. Hopefully it doesn't make you too sad either. But either way, that's the build for the week. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you guys know that I love you. Thank you so much for all that you do for me, for the channel. You're so awesome. I hope you have a great day and a fantastic week. And if you don't, please don't give up. But I hope that you will do good and be kind, and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. All men have left here, but you have remained at the banks of the river, forever the same. Though no water flows here, the memory stays. As long as it stays, you are here, heartbroken year after year. People running away, running like strangers day after day. Leave him alone. Golden river running from her home. Oh, if you guys have not listened to The Staves, you ought to check them out. They're out of the UK. They're like a folk pop group I love. Absolutely. Just like melancholy, lovely, harmonious music. Anyways, check them out. That one, The Mother Lode, that might be my favorite of their songs, I think. Have you seen the new Bluey episodes? Couple more just came out. Bluey fans. You know, the one, there was like this one that was 30 minutes. Okay, excuse me while I wax on about Bluey. There was one, The Sign, it was like 30 minutes long, which is way long for a Bluey episode. And I was a little disappointed in it because it was all about, like, well, spoiler alert. It's all about, like, they were going to move, and Bluey and Bingo didn't want to, and neither did, like, the parents really that much for that matter, but, like, they kind of thought that it was for the best. And then they were really sad about it, and in the end, they decided to stay. And it's like, that's great, but I feel like the show is at its best when it's kind of showing people and children, but really all people, that, like, hey, sometimes hard things happen, and it's okay to be sad about that, and also, like, you're gonna be okay, right? And you're gonna figure this out. And that was just kind of like, oh, you're super sad, and you know what? Fine, let's just stay. And I can't help but think that, like, all the kids watching who have moved recently are gonna be like, hey, that's no fair. How come Bluey gotta stay? What makes the best ranged? Okay, you kind of come up with, like, exhibit number 327 on why full casters. Oops. And it also outdamages every other come on. So that our melee enemy, the sunlight has penetrated the defenses. Oh, hey, son. Let alone our, though, do we really want to use one of our, what's it called? Attunement. Yeah. All right.